And she was telling me about a challenge they were having with this killer feature that they had uncovered using a range of unsupervised and deep learning techniques. They were building, this is years ago, really, really kick-ass playlists of recommended music that a user would like, but may never have discovered or heard before. They called it Discover Weekly. And at the time, that Discover Weekly playlist was this doom scrolling infinite list of songs, which they thought was really cool. They're like, you know what, you're never going to run out of music. Uptake on it though, and they would just constantly be adding. So every week they would add a few new songs to that playlist. They might remove some stuff, but it was constantly growing. Scrolling was a big part of it, and people weren't using it. And so I'm going to date myself here in a moment, but they did some user research. You know, step one of a good foundational design process. They went and talked to end users. They went and talked to customers. And they asked them not why do you use this feature, why do you not use this feature, because that's lazy research design. Instead, they asked them, tell us about your relationship with music. Tell us about memorable moments with music. And there was one theme that no matter where in the world they were talking to people, one theme that came up over and over and over. This sense of nostalgia, the sense of adoration about one really, really key part of everyone's or many people's journey as a music listener, as a music lover. Any guesses on what that one thing was? You can unmute. Honestly, I've got like 4 screens up here for this production. I can't always see the chat. Feel free to jump in. I'll pause for a second. See if I can find the chat window. No guesses? Come on.
Maybe mood.
Mood, yeah, that's one. This was a little bit more almost tangible. What came up over and over and over was the mixtape. Now, if you're old enough to know what a mixtape is, maybe I should say, if you're not old enough to know what a mixtape is, a mixtape was a labor of love, because a mixtape involved you having multiple source albums on cassette, putting them in one side of your tape player and your recorder, putting a blank tape and the other side, and hitting play and record at the same time on both systems and dubbing from one to the other. It wasn't, we're so spoiled and lazy now. It wasn't just dragging songs or picking automatic playlists. You had to go and queue up that album to the right spot and record one song at a time. What that meant was the love that went into creating a mixtape for someone as a gift for yourself reflected back in how people enjoyed music. And so the mixtape came up over and over in these interviews that they did. So what they ended up doing is saying, how do we embed some of the insight from this research into our product? And that's what led to a complete shift in what is now called the Discover Weekly playlist. The Discover Weekly playlist is now a finite playlist. There are typically 25 songs, which would be longer than a tape would hold, but it's still okay. But it has a beginning, a middle, and an end. You can't just keep listening to it forever. And I believe it usually comes out on Fridays. If you get to the next Friday and you missed last week's Discover Weekly, it's basically gone forever. Now, the songs are still there, but arranged as a playlist, they're gone. They actually try to introduce friction. They tried to introduce a finiteness where infinite scroll was the default before to create a better experience. And in doing so, they had a massive, more than 3x uplift in how people were listening to that and discovering new music. And to me, this encompasses why fundamental design, empathy, research, prototyping are so important when we are working with emerging technologies like AI and machine learning. So with that, anyone who's met me before, and maybe there's a few of you have, know that I really don't, I like to be kind of lazy and I don't like to be talking at people all that much. So with that, to start, we're just going to do a very quick breakout. In a second, I'll pop up and I'll ask you to go into a breakout room. There's going to be 2 to 3 of you in each room. Hopefully everyone has at least one person join. And all I want you to do, actually, I'm going to make them slightly bigger in case there's some overhead people. If I see any groups that look lonely, I'll come and join you. I want you to introduce yourselves to one another, because if we were at a real conference, you get to go up to someone and shake their hands and meet them, and we don't get to do that very much in this Zoom-based world. So I want you to do that, and then answer the question: what has been the best designed, or maybe what's been the worst, if it's easier for you to think that way, AI experience you've seen or been a part of? So 3 minutes, it'll be nice and quick. You can now pop into the breakout rooms. I'll jump randomly into a couple myself, and I'll see you in there. So for everyone else, while we do this, I'd love to hear from something you heard from a peer that you thought was inspiring, interesting, challenging, you disagreed with, agreed with, you hadn't thought of before.
I didn't mention this in the breakout room, but actually now that I think about it, something that I find challenging is, when like Instagram and Facebook changed their sorting algorithms for our feeds. So when you log into Facebook and you get sort of your feed, and it was changed from sort of chronological to whatever they think would grab my attention the most. So I found that was a really terrible experience because it basically overrid my personal preferences. And I think initially it didn't give me a way to roll back on that. So it was sort of forced on me, and I didn't have a way to turn it back to what I wanted it to be.
And so let me ask you, David, is it the lack of transparency that made that, like not knowing what causes something to work its way to the top? Is that part of it?
Just looking for the unmute button there. But yeah, that was definitely part of it. I think being more transparent would have helped. I definitely felt manipulated, like it was sort of like I wanted to be able to sort of see everything that's there and not have to, potentially not be able to see things that are just hidden away because Facebook doesn't think I don't need to see it, right?
Yeah, it's a super interesting example. And one, from a design perspective, and you as a user, you're dealing with all kinds of things. You're dealing with personal preferences. You're dealing with FOMO, kind of like fear of missing out. What if this algorithm thinks I like one thing? We'll talk a little bit more about something related to that in a couple of minutes. So since most of you don't know who I am, I see a few familiar names. I see Erica on here, Calvin, a few people I've met in the past. I'm Ramy. It's great to meet you guys. Thank you for indulging me by actually participating, having a discussion. Sorry that the breakout rooms are a little bit working not so great. That's okay. We roll with the punches. I run a company called 1,000 Days Out. We do design research, strategic design. Right now, doing a lot of work in energy sector around clean energy with provincial utility. Doing work in healthcare with a company that actually designed software for the clinical trials industry. I've become a world-renowned fake expert in how clinical drug trials work now. Super fascinating. Doing some work in agriculture as well as construction right now. So I love variety. On the side, I run or help run another company called Olive Group. It's a fintech startup offering card linking and credit card transaction rounding. In a prior life, I ran innovation for Mattel. On the side, I teach design thinking at McMaster. I teach in the Entrepreneurship master's program at Ryerson. And I wrote a book earlier this year called the AI Product Design Handbook. So that's a bit about me. That's enough about me. Next page. If you have a phone nearby, grab a quick scan of this. If you don't have a phone, that's okay. Type in that URL. I'd love to sort of get a pulse and leave all of you guys with a pulse of where everyone's at. I'm scared. I don't want to use the breakout room again right now. So let's just do it this way. So if you have, I'll give you about 30 more seconds and I'll switch screens here and let you see what the results are like. Like I said, you can either type in the URL you see on the screen or scan that QR code. Linda, I just saw your comment that the breakout room was fine, but not enough time. That is always the case. While you guys are voting here, I will say this is a workshop-ish. If David, who started Toronto Machine Learning Society, he and I have run versions of this workshop in a prior life. They used to be full day or even day and a half in-person workshops. Over the next 42 minutes, we're going to introduce some topics to you, hopefully give you a couple of tools that are practical and you can take away. But this really is a bit of a teaser on the topic. And if you ever want to learn more, reach out. We'll talk more about that later. So most importantly here, I'm glad one person voted for the snake. I always feel very bad. Oh, 2 for the snake. 12 of you got the answer right. The cat is objectively the correct answer on this question. I use this mostly because A, they're really cute little animals. B, I like to make sure the tech works. It looks like the majority of you were able to vote. So let's go into a more interesting question. I'd love to get your feeling from an end user value and a business value perspective, not what's cool in tech, not what's hyped up, but what are the ways that AI can or should be used to create value? We'll give you about 45 seconds here to get your answers in. Ultimately, this is about you guys thinking a bit critically about this, but then sort of seeing where does your vote or where your perspective sort of rank in comparison to your peers in the session here? And where does sort of the overall community go with this? So it's funny, when I do this with executives, and I've done it with a number of fairly large companies and board, C-levels and boards, labor force reduction tends to work its way to the top pretty quickly, that process automation. So it's really interesting, maybe just inherently in who would choose to come to a workshop on human-centered design for AI, that these 2 factors are actually down at the bottom, and improved user experiences ranking at the top. So it's nice to see. If I were a person voting, I'd probably cast my first vote for augmented or automated decision-making personally. Okay, this is really cool. So it gives you an idea. So now you can think back to sort of how you rank things and how that compares to a group of, I don't know, about 30 of your peers here. 25 of you have voted so far. One more question to throw at you, again, for that notion of sort of sharing insight here. What's holding us back? Whether you work in a big company, a small company, a startup, non-tech, tech, I'd love to know what you think the factors are in organizations, whether yours or generally, that are holding back AI, because we've been talking about it for so long, but it's not really it's like a bunch of dumpster fires going on all the time, and you don't know which one's the worst. So interesting. Leadership buy-in. Again, when I do this with executives, that one is very, very small because they are the leadership. They think they're bought into this, but it's really interesting to see that that's the biggest one. Okay, that's about as many votes as I'm expecting here, maybe 26. So we've got leadership by AI knowledge and education. If I were voting here, I'd probably have voted for that as the #1 factor personally. We'll talk about that in a couple of minutes when we talk about the notion of curiosity and asking questions as sort of a design skill or competency. But I definitely agree with the 14 of you who ranked that one very, very high. You could also say that use cases and demonstrable ROI are interlinked for sure. So talent gaps, I could tell you guys just anecdotally, a few years ago, this question, talent gap would have been the big one. It looks like that's gotten better, but the buy-in and the knowledge across organizations still has a way to go. So thank you guys for indulging me. We'll go back into this here. So I want to introduce you to 3 practices. There's a couple of practical tools I'll introduce along the way around a human-centered approach or human-centered strategy around AI. So the first is we need to better understand our own biases and the biases that can and are buried in the data that we're dealing with. You guys are all at a machine learning conference. I'm going to make the bold assumption that you understand the fundamental relationship between data and any kind of predictive algorithm or classification algorithm or anything like that. So I won't explain that. But what we will talk about in a moment is sort of the relationship between bias in the data and bias in the results, the prediction, the classification, the decision that comes out of an algorithm. The second one that I think is so important in all things in life is this notion of curiosity. A big challenge I see with organizations starting down their journey with AI is it's not even that it's not being clear, it's not being aware of what questions we even can ask of our data. I remember sitting in a room with a bunch of executives from RBC a number of years ago and literally saying, well, you're piling all this data on our team. What do you want to know? And they couldn't actually say, well, it was more like, well, what can you tell us? And it was a bit of a chicken and the egg discovery around, insights buried in their data sets. The third topic, which I'm just uber passionate about these days, is this idea of looking over a longer time horizon. I actually just recorded a podcast for a friend of mine this morning talking about how do we actually get leadership and executives to think on 2, 3, 5, 10-year time horizons. And in a couple of minutes, I'm going to make an impassioned argument, and you can take it or leave it, but an argument that it's actually easier to think about technology like this on a 10-year time horizon than on a 1-year time horizon. So let's start at the beginning. Biases. So let me ask you guys, actually, close your eyes for a second. And some of you have your video on so I can see. Others, you can just pretend. A bunch of you are logged in, not even paying attention. That's okay too. You can watch the recording later. If I ask you to imagine a CEO, what is the first picture that comes to mind? Not the image that you overwrite because of some sense of responsibility to do so or otherwise, but what's the first image that comes to mind? Anyone want to share? No right or wrong answers here.
White privileged male.
So yeah, I will agree with you 85%. I will agree with you except for the word privilege, only because I don't know how to visualize privilege. But I will certainly agree with you that the first image that comes to my mind is white male. And so what happens when we ask Google image search for that same interpretation? We ask it its question. Well, we get a response like this. This is a real screen cap. I took it probably about a year and a half, 2 years ago now. It's different on different days of the week. It's different by user. It's different based on where you live. It's different all the time because the algorithm's ever evolving and there's a lot of personalization there. But this was a real search result I got. Couple of familiar faces in there. I see Steve Jobs. I see Jim Bosley. But you're right. I think it was Eric who said it. White male. And yeah, let's be honest. They look pretty privileged anyway. Obviously, there is a female result here. Unfortunately, it's not a real person. There's only one, and it's CEO Barbie. And in fact, as someone who used to work with Mattel, I can tell you that was never even a real product. So this is an awful result, obviously. Is this result wrong? Let's assume that that was a real human female image and not a pretend product. Is the result wrong? Well, if I were playing devil's advocate, which I love to do, I would say maybe not. I would point to the fact that as of May, the Fortune, and it's just the last data point I have, so it's about 6 months old, but as of May, the Fortune 500 of the highest capitalized or biggest publicly traded companies in the world had 37 female CEOs. If you don't feel like getting your calculator out, it's around 7%. By sheer coincidence, if I remember right, there are 22 or 23 images here, of which one is female. That's a little bit below 5%. We are not far off on the ratio. So while we're not happy to see this result, and we would say it's not diverse and all these other things, statistically, it may not be that far off. And the problem is algorithms learn from data, right? There is not a person at Google whose job it is to explicitly program in what a CEO does or should look like. Instead, the algorithm crawls the internet, looks at images that are tagged. CEO maybe have the word CEO in the image itself, in the metadata, in the file name, builds models of what that composite or what those images look like, and then looks for similar images and intelligently labels those as CEO. And therein lies the problem. And the piece I want you to take away from this, because I'm going to skip over a second example in a second here. The piece I want you to take away from this idea about bias is that bias in our data set, when we're using any kind of machine intelligence algorithm, bias in our data set can be reflected back at us. And that's maybe okay, maybe not. What is scary and what we really need to be thinking about is bias can be amplified back. And that's where we really have to look at. It's that amplification effect. that is so potentially detrimental in what we're talking about here. So that's the first one. We all have biases. Every one of us humans has biases based on how and where and around whom we grew up and our education and our experiences and our collective lives. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with having bias. It's about that awareness. And so organizations need to start thinking about how do we help identify biases and think about whether those biases are being reflected or amplified back in our algorithms. So I'm going to skip past the second example on bias because I just want to make sure we get to the slightly more hands-on stuff at the end. The second practice I want to talk about for a second is curiosity. I hate the expression curiosity killed the cat. Curiosity is what helped the cat survive over millions of years of evolution, if you ask me. AI helps us, as we know, in many cases, uncover signals buried in a lot of noise. The proverbial needle in the haystack. AI is really, really good at that. Curiosity is the human complement, I think, to be able to make sense of what AI can tell us. What I love about curiosity so much is that it is a learned and a honable skill. This was a study that's published in HBR a couple of years ago about curiosity. And what they did was they actually looked at three different, they invented this very made up sounding word. They developed something called CQ, curiosity quotient. Just like you have your IQ, your intellect quotient, you have your emotional intelligence, your EQ. They developed curiosity quotient. They wanted to see how does that relate. And what they looked at was career progression in executives and management people, and a number of other factors. And in many of the organizations they studied, what they found was that curiosity was as or more important than intelligence. If you break that down for a second, it might mean you'd be more successful in the company if you just ask a bunch of questions all the time versus being the person who knows the answers to the questions. Now, that is reductive to say, and it's not a fair statement, but I find it kind of fun. So this notion of curiosity, I think, with this emerging set of capabilities we have around AI is so important. In fact, increasingly so important when it comes to AI. The other thing that they found was that IQ, your intellect quotient, how smart you are, if you will, doesn't really change over your lifetime. Yes, you can learn new skills, but you don't fundamentally change your IQ. CQ can be trained. In fact, it kind of goes in a wave. Kids have very high curiosity quotient in our education system in our world, somehow beats the curiosity out of them over their development, but it can be brought back. Designers tend to be, and I mean like not necessarily only graphic designers, but sort of design-minded problem solvers tend to be curious in their nature. And it is that skill or competency. Sometimes use the word soft skill. I do a lot of work in the education system. They call soft skills competencies now because they're no better or worse than hard skills. So I use the word competency. That competency, I think, is so fundamentally important. Now, why it's important is because we need to develop new ways of asking questions. And so AI and strategic sort of machine learning technology leaders need to help others ask the right questions. So what do I mean by that? This is a fake resume. And it's made by a designer, so it has a lot of lorem ipsum on it. So in the world of HR, as one specific example, there is a massive amount of technology and a lot of startups and tech companies who are promising pieces of software, pieces of technology to automate candidate screening, candidate validation. 20 years ago, when I was applying for my first job, the way this happened was they would look for keywords on your resume. And if you were really clever like I was, you realized you could put all the keywords you could think of in the bottom in size 1 font in white at the bottom of your Word document. They wouldn't be visible to a person, but the algorithm would see the keywords there. Quickly, we caught on to that. Now these algorithms are actually doing natural language processing, intent detection, often looking you up in social media and other public channels, all based on your resume. And that's fine. I'm not in love with it, but it's okay. And it saves time for an HR recruiter, a talent scout, a screener. Where this becomes problematic is that fundamental problem we talked about earlier, this bias in the data being reflected or amplified back in a result. So where this notion of asking the right questions comes in, where it comes in to ask and helping is, this is going to sound overly stereotyping. I don't mean it to be, but the way I'll phrase it is, not every HR recruiter understands what machine learning is and how these tools work. There may well be some, but it is not necessarily for the majority their exact training or background or discipline, nor has it ever been a requirement. But suddenly, if you put a tool like this in front of an HR generalist, a recruiter, a screener, and they just see the outcome of the tool, are they equipped to ask the right questions? What are the questions? Where did the training data come from? These are just examples. Did the training data include a diverse population of candidates? What biases might exist in that training data? How could the bias impact the results that the software provides? Who in the organization needs to be asking these questions? These are all the things we should be thinking about. If we're going to use a tool like this. The problem is, it's not necessarily the machine learning or the AI engineer or operator or leader who's actually interfacing with the tool or even making the purchasing decision to buy the software and enroll in it. And so that's where earlier when we talked about the biggest factors that are impacting reluctance to adopt, 14 of you voted, and I said I would vote too, so that's 15 voted for knowledge and education, because I think a basic understanding, if no other lesson comes out of it, the relationship between data as an input and a predictive or classification result as an output, understanding that fundamental relationship is so critical. And then being skeptical. And I put skepticism right next to curiosity as an important skill. Skeptical is always seen as a bad word. Oh, you're being skeptic. No, skeptical is asking questions. And we should be skeptical when we're working with these technologies. So that's the second big one here. The third is the one I get most excited about. And you can tell I get excited about this stuff in general. Looking longer. What is that? What do I mean by that? I want to introduce a field of design called speculative or spec design. Speculative design is the field, the area of academic inquiry about designing for the future, potentially even with technologies that don't exist yet. I'm going to play you about a 50-second video clip from a video that was produced by Google. It was played at their internal user conference and then leaked. But if you play a video for, I don't know, a few 100,000 employees, it will get leaked. So I don't think it's a big secret. The video was called, and I think it's about 16 minutes long in total. I got less than a minute for you, but it's called The Selfish Ledger. And the term selfish actually comes from a book in biology, a really fundamental book called The Selfish Gene, that was groundbreaking about this notion that our genes are inherently selfish and we're basically just all trying to reproduce all the time. This is an example of speculative design. I'm just showing you one little clip of this from the kind of short film they made. I would super encourage you, that's why I put the screen up, this is the title of it, to watch it. It's terrifying. And we'll talk about why it's so scary in a moment, but I'll put it up for a second here.
User data has the capability to survive beyond the limits of our biological selves, in much the same way as genetic code is released.
I just saw someone said that it's not
propagated
sharing the full screen. Let me just.
Yeah, we're sharing your desktop window.
Oh, that's okay. Nothing too personal there. Is that better? I just want you guys to have a better view. Sorry, I just hit the wrong one.
Yeah, that's good.
Perfect. Okay. Sorry, guys.
By considering this data through a Lamarckian lens, the codified experiences within the ledger become an accumulation of behavioral knowledge throughout the life of an individual. By thinking of user data as multi-generational, it becomes possible for emerging users to benefit from the preceding generation's behaviors and decisions. As new users enter an ecosystem, they begin to create their own trail of data. By comparing this emergent ledger with the mass of historical user data, it becomes possible to make increasingly accurate predictions about decisions and future behaviors. As cycles of collection and comparison extend, it may be possible to develop a species-level understanding of complex issues such as depression, health, and poverty. Our ability to interpret user data combined with the exponential growth in sensor-enabled objects, will result in an increasingly detailed account of who we are as people. As these streams of information are brought together, the effect is multiplied. New patterns become apparent and new predictions become possible.
So, thank you, and sorry for my misshare there for a moment. That was produced in, I believe, 2018, and we're going to come back to it in a second. But it is an example of this conceptual notion, and there's so much that came out of it. But they basically talk about AI that behaves the way our DNA and our genes do, and what happens when we get to that point. Even this notion of multi-generational data sets. Immediately after this was leaked, Google went on the defensive saying, oh, we're not building anything that looks anything like this. Don't worry, we're not evil. And that's okay. Oop. Come on. I'm going to come back to the selfish ledger in a minute with a hopefully rounding out example for it. The next piece of sort of this idea of speculative design and looking on the longer time horizon is the importance, or sort of the power of thinking on a longer time horizon, then scaling it back. I told you before that I'm going to kind of poke you a little bit and say, convince you, or maybe make the argument that it's easier to think on a 10-year time horizon than there's a 1 year. So what is an example of that? Let's think about this in the automotive industry. As a 10-year forecast, we know sensors, all different types of sensors and connected hardware will be cheaper and more everywhere, in our vehicles, our homes, even inside our bodies. We have the ability to make sense, and we'll have better ability, I should say, to make sense of the data. Ubiquitous sensors will disrupt how leaders lead, giving us unbelievable abilities to make better, smarter, faster, more accurate decisions. Over a 10-year period, the forecast is really hard to refute, okay? That said, all of these different things could be possibilities in 10 years. In fact, most of them will be. But what the future of the automotive industry or any kind of industry will look like a year or two from now becomes really challenging, let alone figuring out who will make money, who will be the winners, who will be the losers, who will develop scalable business models around the technology. So the challenge for leaders is to look on a longer time horizon, understand where things are headed, which can be done. And there are exercises. There's something called a Janus cone. It's an exercise I love running with teams in the workshops I lead that helps people say, well, what does it look like in 5, 10, 15 years from now? And then we do something called backcasting to sort of work that back, that future state back to the present. So instead of forecasting, we call it backcasting. These are all the tools of the speculative design landscape. If we start looking further forward into the future, the further out we look, the less certain we are. But there is this area of plausible potential solutions and technologies. And yes, there are positive disruptors, there are negative things, there's the probable, and there's always the wild card. What's the wild card? A couple of years ago, if you had told someone about TikTok and what it had become, that's a wild card. That's a thing you can't really predict. But general trends in how people communicate through social media, absolutely. So if you've gone back 20 years and you looked at or maybe 15 years, looked at the trends of Facebook and Twitter in its early days, you could extrapolate forward and backcast these futures. That is all part of the serious speculative design. And strategic foresight would be the umbrella discipline around this. It is so vitally important when it comes to AI and machine learning. I want to give you, though, one more example of why this stuff is cool and interesting and scary. So I'm going to play you one more video. It's also less than a minute long. It's a little bit older.
Graduate research team in Guatemala, just checking in. Robert Jordan, a second semester junior, requesting a second extension on his term paper. And your mother reminding you about your father.
Surprise birthday party next Sunday.
Today you have a faculty lunch at 12 o'clock. You need to take Kathy to the airport by 2. You have a lecture at 4:15 on deforestation in the Amazon rainforest.
Right.
Okay, let's put aside just how remarkably academic and borderline douchey this professor type stereotype person is in the video. What we should take away from this, you just saw a video of basically an iPad with Siri. This video was published in 1987, 20 years before the iPhone went to market, 25 years before Siri was a thing. This is an amazing example of speculative design. Yes, there are aspects of it that we didn't really implement, but the general concept here, this is a touch, lightweight, portable screen with audio video interface that helps you with scheduling your life and your calendar. That was decades ahead of its time. So now we put 2 and 2 together. We say, okay, well, in 1987, Apple, by the way, published this under this notional thing called Knowledge Navigator. Well, in 2018, Google published this thing called the Selfish Ledger. I'm not saying that all the stuff from that Selfish Ledger, there's a ton of creepy stuff in there, will come true or might come true. But that's the point of speculative design. Speculative design is the ability to think about how we use technologies that don't even exist yet. And it is a really important skill because when we decide what the solution is and how we create end user value, which is really what design is about, human-centered design in particular, we can now say, okay, well, we want this future. How do we work backwards toward this? How do we pull this future into our current reality, our near-term reality? That is an unbelievable skill. And whereas machine learning engineers, data scientists are often focused on pushing algorithms and core computational capabilities forward, I think we have a massive gap in this industry, in this area of specialization for designers who can be thinking about how the technology will solve problems for us in the future. And I think that's where this idea of looking longer becomes so powerful. I don't know why they always play this video twice. So that's the idea of speculative design. It's what might possible futures look like? And in order to start working with spec design, you need new tools. And so I'm going to introduce one of them to you. This, I know it's hard to read, and that's okay. This is a mural board. It's just a digital whiteboard. This is from a workshop I ran not that long ago. We had 4 breakout groups going. And each group was given a problem statement. I'll zoom in on this in a second. So on the top left is a problem statement. One of them was, how might we use AI to improve equity and affordability in housing? So the big picture questions. If you just ask someone that question and he said, brainstorm ideas, you're going to get shitty ideas. We aren't very good at brainstorming. We actually need constraints. We actually need prompts and help to spark creativity. So that's where that purple icon on the top right comes in. When you click on that, you get to this PDF, which I will zoom in on a second, but it's this deck of cards that I helped create. And there's a few versions of them out there. This is my favorite one. Call it the machine learning capabilities cards. Each card has a front and a back. The front starts with what if? What if you could use technology to sense a user's current emotional state? What if you could use technology to detect specific gestures? Whatever happens to be, they're all AI focused. The back of the card shows a couple of real world examples, whether in commercial production or in R&D. This is a few of the cards picked at random. What if you can recognize and respond to users' body, hand, and facial gestures? And on the back, you see examples of it. What if you can generate text or images based on examples? On the back, there's some examples of it. So when we assemble these pieces, now I'm zoomed in on the canvas, what happens is we say, we have a problem statement. How might we use AI to help an individual run their first marathon ever? This was just a fun, goofy one we did. Then we have these what if ideation cards. And what we do is we literally kind of play poker. We can do it virtually or in person, but in these workshops, we'll spend a few hours on this. We'll say, great, you dealt the what if you can interact with a chatbot card. Now the team is tasked to say, we have the how might, we have the problem statement, we have this prompt, what if your user can interact with a chatbot? What are some ideas we would use that technology and how we would use that technology to solve that problem statement? And you can see in that case, they came up with 4 ideas. There might have been a 5th that they moved out of the way. And we do this on like rapid fire. And if you have 5 people in a group and you spend half an hour on this, you might come up with 30, 40, 50, 60 ideas. If you would just put the problem statement up that says, how might we use AI to help an individual run their first marathon? You're just not going to get the same volume of ideas, and you're less likely to come onto something that's a real spark. What happened afterwards was they generated 25, 30 ideas, and then they had some stars. They got to vote on their top ones, and you can see now the good ideas surfacing to the top. Now, when you do an exercise like this, when you use sort of this idea of, I call it wild combinations, right? Combining a problem statement with technology and hoping for a good result, you're going to get a lot of bad ones, and that's okay. Terrible ideas 100% lead the way to good ones. If we are afraid of suggesting terrible ideas, we will never suggest the wild, crazy, interesting, good one. So this is a toolkit. If you ever want to use any of this stuff, just drop me a note. I'm happy to send you some of the templates I've created. We use this to help teams say, we want to use AI to solve some problems. We don't know where to begin. We don't know what questions we could ask. We don't know how to use the technology. This is, again, where that human-centered design approach is used to solve the problem. And so I'm going to pause there. I was going to do one more group exercise with confusion matrices, but we'll save that for another time. Yeah, so wrapping up where we kind of went, we talked about this idea of speculative design, looking longer, strategic foresight. How do we actually think on a longer time horizon? And that's so vitally important when working with emerging technology that is changing daily, weekly, monthly. We talked about the importance of curiosity as a competency or a soft skill needed for anyone or any team to be successful in working with these technologies. It's a core skill for a human-centered design approach. And we talked about just the sheer relevance or magnitude of thinking about our own biases and data sets, and making sure that the people we work with, when we're advocating for these solutions, a lot of people talk about leadership buy-in, making sure our leaders, our executives understand the relationship between data and predictions or classifications and how those might be reflected or amplified. If we're not aware of those, that's where we get that bias creeping into our results and potentially bad outcomes. So that's a bit of a recap. I know we wanted to save a couple of minutes for Q&A, so I'm going to skip the thing on AI design sprints. I'll just put it on the screen if anyone's curious. This is another model around how we might use a design approach with AI. This is a model around what we call our AI design sprints, typically 5 days. It doesn't have to be in a week, but it often is, around 5 different areas. So it's built on the overall design sprint model, but specific to AI, on how we kind of go from problem statement through to validated prototype in a couple of short working sessions. And I get asked about the AI design sprint. So I thought I'd put that up on the screen here while we open it up to any questions anyone might have.
First of all, I want to thank you, Ramy, for the talk. That was really engaging and very informative. We thank you for that. So the floor is open for the Q&A. For anyone that wants to ask a question, you can, maybe because of the time we have, you can unmute yourself and ask any question. Then Ramy will be willing to answer that. But Ramy, you mentioned that we can hook you up. So can you maybe put your email in the chat box so that
yeah, it's there, and I'll put it in the chat too.
Okay, no problem.
Man, I did a good job if there's no questions.
Oh, that's it. Okay. Okay. I have
a question.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry, Linda.
Hi there, Ramy. Awesome presentation. I really liked how interactive it was and how you gave a lot of practical examples. So job well done there. I work for the York Region government, and I was actually tasked to watch your session to see if you'd be a good candidate to kind of lead government employees or staff and upper level management through some design thinking exercises and trying to figure out how we can apply, I guess, AI within government. So I was just wondering about your experience in the public sector and if you think that would be a good idea on your part.
Yeah, I actually have been doing work with an organization called Forward 50. So that's a big digital government conference. Since a guy named Alistair Krall started that, internationally known now. It's in Ottawa every year. I've been running workshops with them every year, and that's led to a couple of government projects on this. And like, we actually tend to even call it the first year I did a workshop at Ford 50, we called it citizen-centric design, at which point I was told it wasn't super inclusive, and we've changed it to resident-centric design, which is an important differentiation. It just doesn't have the nice alliteration, but yeah, definitely, I think that resident or citizen, whatever you want to call it, centric design is vitally important. Like if governments, especially at the municipal, local level, can't get this right and create solutions that are meaningful for citizens, residents of that city or that community, how can we expect private organizations to, right? So totally open to chat more about that. I think it's just so important, design thinking generally, but then also specific to emerging tech.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, Lucas, the first run of the book was done. We're doing a second edition of it. So they've stopped selling the first edition. The second edition will be in the spring.
Okay. Thank you. So we are also open to more questions. If anyone has questions to ask Ramy now he's around. So I have a question to Ramy. This concept of bias in AI is been long running for a long time now. Is there any conscious maybe methodology or maybe tool or concept that you know of to handle this bias in data? Because as far as I know, data is data, right? You can't actually change it. So is there any idea?
You get into like slippery slope algorithms. So for example, and I think that's what makes it so challenging. So if we think about that CEO example and you ask people, how would you resolve that example? They might say, well, you could put a filter on the results and filter the results to have equal male, female. Yeah, you definitely could. But then you should probably put another filter on for equal based on skin color, equal results. You can get to it. So I don't like slippery slope arguments philosophically, but you get to that point where if you are just filtering results of any sort of algorithmic approach, at what point do you stop? At what point are you still representing the data? The second thing that makes it hard, which is why I don't have a hard answer for you, you have to get it right to the beginning. It's really hard to refactor the system. Is, let's say we could snap our fingers right now and wake up, let's say wake up tomorrow morning in a world where 50% of the CEOs of Fortune 500 companies are female. Great. If we wake up in that world tomorrow and we do a Google image search for CEO, what are the results going to be? Probably pretty similar than they were the day before, because it also takes time for all those data sources to be updated too, right? The internet never forgets. We have all this historic, archaic, in some cases, data that is also impacting things. So I think that there's no one tool or any quick fix like that. I think the first step for organizations is to have what my friend Julian would call is the galvanizing discussion, the discussion where you lay it on the table and you say, there is bias in our data, there's bias in how we make decisions, and we need to discuss that and think about what that means. That could, so one really cool example, which I don't have time to put up on the screen, I can literally search for it, algorithmic impact assessment. This is and this is for Linda too, this is a federal government tool. It's actually open source, which is pretty cool. I learned about it at Ford 50 after a workshop, which someone came and told me that they actually worked on it. What this tool is as of May of 2019, I believe, any government at the federal level system or technology that has any sort of augmented or machine-assisted decision-making happening has to go through this impact assessment. When you do the impact assessment, you can see a little bit about this, it spits out a score. And not only that score, it takes about 35 minutes to run through. You can do it in 5 if you just want to play with it, because it's basically just a giant Google form. But that score then tells you, based on the score, what you have to do. So you'll get an impact level, a current score, a raw impact score, and a mitigation score. I don't really have time to talk about what those all mean. But if you have a high impact score, for example, it might mean that you have to have clear English language about the use of the algorithm before someone starts interacting. I will tell you that this tool has been very well received in the international government AI community. I know of several AI leaders in different governments around the world who have worked with who have taken and forked off this code from GitHub and actually started building their own assessment tools. So this is an example. Now, this one is a little bit more government public sector focused, but creating an assessment tool that validates or measures or estimates the risk associated with the algorithmic decision making, and then imposing specific requirements based on that risk level, I think is one scalable approach for this. So that's the best I can come up with.
Okay, thank you so much for that answer. I think we've kind of exhausted our time today. Thanks so much for all that came for the conference, for the workshop. And thank you, Ramy, for that wonderful presentation. For our conference tomorrow, you're going to receive a Hopin login in your email to log in through the Hopin app for that. So thanks all. So we now close the workshop. Thank you so much.
Have a great day, everyone. Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Have a wonderful day.